and third is really cost containment. And if I start backwards on cost containment, our historical product line has been around financial assurance and helping on the wholesale side of the telecommunications business. On the revenue generation and revenue containment side or revenue protection side, we use predictive analytics mainly to do that. And we focus in 5 core areas to generate and protect revenue. First is around the M2m space, which is, although it's not emerging, I think the terms are emerging over the last 18 months, and really looking at how we generate more revenue out of those low ARPU, high volume devices, as well as how we upsell, how do we get adoption, better adoption of those devices. Second is really around customer experience and customer experience management. So looking at the full end-to-end life cycle, anything from onboarding and acquisition to customer loyalty, retention, cross-sell, and collections. Third would be around quality of service, so looking at the network data and the volumes of network data that are coming through and understanding not just what issues are occurring in the network, but how do we actually predict what issues may occur in the network over the next 5 days or 5 weeks, so you can take proactive measures, predictive maintenance, if you will. We also, in the area of profitability, so looking at current profitability down to customer, product, service, and location level, as well as predicting future profitability. And finally, around audience management, which is, again, I'll call it an emerging space, but looking at ad impressions across multiple devices, both first, second, and third screen devices, and being able to forecast, reconcile, and optimize sales around that arena.
Got it. Got it. That sounds good. Well, Chris, I appreciate the insight there, and I'm sure we'll be able to get some good comments from you on this as well. So, well, I don't want to take over too much of the talking here. So, I was going to let maybe have Roberta maybe kick us off with maybe a couple of questions if she has any for our panel members, kind of on the topics here that we're looking at with Telecom Analytics. So, Roberta, if you want to go ahead and maybe throw out some questions for discussion here.
Sure. I think we should. It's worth it to start talking a little bit about challenges carriers face when using these analytics tools to improve customer experience. For example, the legacy that I talked, the management that Rob mentioned. So what do you think challenges are, and how carriers can deal with these challenges?
Well, first of all, when we talk about customer experience, this is a very broad category. We've been doing customer experience research for years, and we've come to the point where we've kind of defined it as every touch point a customer has with a service provider. And of course, it's even more complex than that in the communications industry, because for the newer services, whether they are data services, consumer data services, or M2m, as Chris mentioned, or others, you're also dealing with devices and applications, right? And so that adds to the complexity of it. But I mean, some of the issues of those things that, in addition to not controlling the full value chain, are those things that you talked about. They are legacy systems, there's data quality and integrity issues, there's even timing issues around synchronization of different sources of data, all of that sorts of thing. And the other thing that we found, I should say, TM Forum just ran we just ran our largest conference of the year in Nice in May, and we did a pre-event event on customer experience. And one of the things that the customer experience managers who attended that brought up repeatedly was their inability to overcome organizational issues in terms of driving these things across the organization. So I think there are all those fundamental issues. I guess the final thing I would say is cost. When I was talking about delivering a 360-degree view to one of the CIOs at the event, he simply said to me, "Do you realize how much it costs to drive that across all of your devices, across all of your channels, across all of your products, and across all of your geographies," right? This can be very expensive, especially if they've taken the typical piecemeal approach that most service providers have historically.
Yeah, interesting. So, yeah, I don't know, Chris, if you got any insight maybe into that as well. And obviously the cost issue, I'm sure you're dealing with probably with all your customers. But yeah, maybe any sort of insight you see, kind of the challenges there with the market.
Yeah, I think there are certainly
CRM, and to put it all together, I realized that there is a great volume of data, and of course, the cost to maintain and to analyze everything must be more expensive. So how do you think this, how do you see this integrated view about data from devices, from network, from IT systems, and putting everything together to improve this customer experience?
Well, I think it's a wonderful vision, all right? And I think it's a wonderful end state, but I just don't, being really frank, I just don't think it's where the industry is. As even internally within service providers, pulling together a single version of the truth, if you will, for customer data has been very difficult for most of these companies because of the stovepipes. So to add all of those other kinds of sources of data, and then add unstructured data from that, say for social networks, to add semi-structured stuff, let's say from web interaction, or maybe from a set-top box or something like that, and then in fact to add the device information. It's just real, and then deliver that, let's say, to a CSR or a marketing person in real time. That's the holy grail, right? That's a very hard, difficult thing to do, and so I think that is an appropriate state, and I do think we see service providers moving toward that and increasingly recognizing the importance of that vision. But I don't think that's where we are yet. I also think there are organizational issues here. I'm not sure with your research, Roberta, and I should ask when you dug in, who were the people who were actually doing the analytics, interpreting the analytics? Were they business people? Were they people in the IT organization? Was the whole thing, including the infrastructure, let's say, distributed, the compute infrastructure and so on and so forth, distributed out to the businesses and managed departmentally, or was it done centrally by the IT organization? I mean, kind of what were the roles and goals? Because I see with the new stuff, with the traditional BI stuff, a lot of that is still within the IT organization, but so much of the new stuff has gravitated out to the business at this point. I'm not sure if you saw the same thing.
Yeah, I saw it too. I found that carriers are not in this stage. They are very in the early stage of adopting this real-time analytics. And this whole view that I mentioned, it's something that we might see in the future. I'm not sure in how many years it can happen. And regarding who inside the carriers who will lead this process, I heard about CTO and CIO. In my particular view, I think they will have to work all together, because CIOs, they have the view of the whole company, integrating the systems. They know systems that were deployed, but they lack information in some particularities, for example, technical or information from the network. So I believe in the carriers, as well as in many industries, they will have to work all together and into this bigger objective.
So let me offer a slightly different opinion, and Chris, I'd be interested in your opinion on this as well, but let me offer a slightly different opinion. With historical analytics, we've been solving what I would describe as relatively straightforward problems, sometimes straightforwardly complex, but relatively straightforward problems. When we talk about the stuff that Chris is talking about, so doing data mining and trying to extract meaning and trying to interpret what may seem like counterintuitive sorts of results, this requires very deep business knowledge, all right, by the analysts. So in a sense, it's difficult to expect that from the IT organization. It needs to be someone almost in the business, and I think for two reasons, all right. Number one is because of the understanding they need, first of all, to ask the right question. I know Chris focused on that. And secondly, to build an appropriate model. That takes deep understanding. And even politically or organizationally, the business people always tend to speak their own language, and there is more credibility of someone presenting the results in that language than there is necessarily from a technical person, if you like. So for those reasons, what I've seen is a tremendous amount of distribution. That doesn't mean it can't come together in the future as we take a more holistic cross-organizational look. But right now, it seems to be most of the cutting-edge stuff seems to be sitting in the business. Chris, what's your experience with it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with I think everything you said. It's interesting to see the evolution. IT has really had, I think, the handle on analytics historically, and the business has been a recipient of that, but has not been really the creator of those analytics generally. Where I've seen it work best is when analytics is actually broken out as a centralized organization, and going across both the IT, because they do need to have that deep technical expertise in statistics and modeling and data mining, but also, as you mentioned, Rob, right, that deep business expertise. And asking the right questions is at the forefront of having that business expertise. The third piece is really having the analytic expertise. The other piece that I've seen is operators tend to be in the realm of asking the same old questions because there's always been limitations around the data, around the types of questions that they're asking, because the data hasn't been available. And now we can ask a whole different level of questions. Before, we had to ask questions that were really hypotheses. Is network quality of service causing churn, and how much? Right? You send that over to IT, you get a report back, and it gives you some answers. Now we're able to say, what's causing customer dissatisfaction? What's causing customer churn? And you're looking at not 5 or 10 attributes that you've requested in a report, but literally tens of thousands of attributes that you can now mine and make sense of from both a technical perspective and a business perspective. So that centralized organization, I think, is going to be key in moving forward to getting that 360-degree view, and to both your points, asking the right questions.
I agree. And I also have heard a lot about the emergence of data scientists. I'm not sure if it's in Brazil, where I'm based, it's not common yet. We don't have this type of profession, but it's something that I've been hearing a lot, and I think this profession, for what I heard, is going to be the person who will connect everything into the organization.
Well, I think that's right, and I think that there are so many skills required for these folks, and even Roberta, sitting in obviously a long-developed economy in the United States, there aren't that many of them around here, nor are there that many specific focused sorts of curriculums in the universities necessarily bring it. I know North Carolina State, for example, has a master's now in analytics, where I think they'll start with strength in one of those skills and perhaps add the others on over time.
Agreed.
Interesting. Well, I mean, it seems like, again, from listening to you guys and kind of the real-time nature of where analytics is going, I guess my question would be the actionability of this information seems to be maybe the next step, or where are we at with that part of it? Because again, it's great to have all this information. Obviously, there's a lot more that can still be gleaned from these networks, but it seems like there's a time lapse between the actionability of this information, actually being able to use it to improve operations, to get more money out of operations, other ways to use it. I guess, how are we progressing when it comes to the real-time actionability of these analytics that we're getting out of these networks? I don't know, Chris, if you've got any insight in kind of how we're progressing that way and actually be able to really get this stuff to market as fast as possible, or to the people who need to make the decisions as fast as possible.
Sure. I think we're getting better. We're getting closer, certainly, to becoming more actionable with the information that's coming out. I still think there is a fair amount of latency, and I think, again, that comes down to not so much the speed at which the actions can be taken, but it's the speed at which we can actually gather the data to do that. So we talk a lot about big data. We talk a lot about we're going to have terabytes, petabytes, zettabytes of data sitting in these centralized data warehouses, but you still have to put a request in today to get some information out, and that there's a latency there, and it's it's a technical latency, it's a resource constraint, and probably several other things. Yeah. I believe where we're end up is what we're looking at is more adaptive analytics. So our big data platform has current data in it, some historical information, but we have to purge data right along that axis somewhere. We're looking at adaptive analytics, and this is what we work on a daily basis, which is we actually don't know what questions we're going to ask tomorrow. If we don't know what questions we're going to ask tomorrow, how do we know what data we need to capture? We needed to have captured yesterday. So we're fans of actually keeping far more historical data, than those might be used to from a BI perspective or descriptive analytics perspective. and trying to get to your point, Dan, very quick actionable insights. If you look at the M2m market, for instance, M2m was, I'll call it, a bit of a buzzword. It's been around for a long time, but the last 6, 8, 12 months, it's become pervasive. All of a sudden, we want data from 2, 3, 4 years back on M2m devices, MiFi devices, other types of devices, and we don't have that data because it's been purged. So now I have to wait 3, 6, 9 months before I can have enough information to start making those actionable decisions. Versus if you look at adaptive analytics, we already have that information. We didn't know we were going to ask these questions. We didn't know, right, M2m was going to be such a hot topic 6 months or 12 months down the road. And now we can help, help the CSPs actually make those decisions in more real time.
Interesting. I don't know, yeah, Robert, if you've got any insight maybe on kind of, I guess, that aspect of it as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think there's a balance between the two. I think certainly for relatively new industry segments, what Chris is saying is absolutely correct. You need to collect a lot of information because you don't really know where the insight is going to come from. And if you're using some of the new hardware architectures, which some of the service providers tell me they get an order of magnitude lower cost out of per byte, let's say, then that can be economically viable. I guess the concern that I have with a lot of the companies who are just starting, a lot of times you need to get some momentum with this stuff, right? So you want to manage, to me, you want to manage your big data portfolio like a portfolio. You want some fast burners and some quick wins in there to gain management confidence and to get them to adapt it and incorporate it into the decision process. And then you want some more, let's say, less structured kinds of programs where you're looking for where maybe you're looking for a silver bullet, I'll say, among a huge haystack or something like that, right? So you need a mix of those things, but you do need momentum because there have been, honestly, there have been many IT failure projects that have failed in the past. So you've got to get that momentum to get the management confidence and the management support.
Interesting. Good, sounds good. Well, Roberto, I want to make sure you get some questions in there as well too. If you have anything else you want to share with these guys as well.
Yeah, I think we should just talk about a little bit about big data. In which stage do you think telecom operators are on adopting big data tools? I mean, big data has been there for a while, but my concern is: are carriers embracing it? Are carriers addressing everything that is needed to manage big data?
Well, let me start first by asking you what you mean by big data, because last time I did my research, I got 26 different answers as to what big data was, and it was everything from real-time streaming to ETL, if you will, extract, transform, load on steroids, to the 3 V's, if you like, so volume, variety, and velocity, and you can throw in veracity, I guess, if you want. Well, if we're really talking about unstructured data, is that what we're talking about, Roberta?
I tend to use the 3 or 4 V's: volume, variety, and I forgot the last one.
And velocity and veracity. Value. There's really 5 as far as I'm concerned, because you have to include value in there, right? And the most important, at the end of the day, you're doing this to get some business value, right? So yes, it is volume, variety, velocity, veracity, if you like that term, and then value. So that incorporates a lot of different things. Well, I think there's a lot of experimentation that's going on now. I think there have been some real successes. Some of those are custom built in-house things. Some of those are if you will, almost big data applications that are starting to come out from different types of vendors. I mean, RazorSight is a good example of that, I think. Some of them are even, let's say, just being used for reduction. So say taking a huge unstructured file and doing massive reduction, correlation, and filtration of say, data using Hadoop, and then
across the multiple lines of business, across the different entities, and various other arenas. But generally, I think there are many in the early adoption stage. I think those who have gotten far still haven't figured out the monetization of that big data. in many cases. It's not a whole.
No, I think that's right. I think that's really just starting, and a lot of that gets into the issue of even privacy, if you will, right?
Absolutely.
Because you can start. I think it was you who mentioned mobile advertising, right? And working with that, and how much privacy is necessary, and how's it going to vary by country, and how are the users going to feel about it? I mean, even with the recent NSA, I know three of us from America, even with the recent NSA snooping that we've seen that's happened, even with that, I was surprised to see a Pew Research number. I think it was yesterday that 56 of their respondents actually said that what should I say, that the end justifies the means. If you can protect people from terrorism, let's say in this case, which is a lot different than having a personalized advertising experience, as we all know, right? But if you can protect people from that, then maybe 56% of people thought it was okay. Now, how many think it's okay for advertising or something like that? I don't know. And how do you deliver it? These are questions that are still largely to be answered, I think.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously that privacy issue is definitely one of those evolving issues because it does seem like maybe by the day or by the year, people are a little more open to sharing information about themselves through different means. And as some of us get older and are replaced by younger people, it seems like they are more and more open to doing that. So perhaps analytics has a much brighter future than even we can imagine. So.
well, I think the potential is there. The key question is what, and it's a simple question, really. What value do I get from sharing my information? And if you can give me great data, and all of us too. All of us are almost overwhelmed by the amount of information that we receive. And as an industry analyst, I mean, this is all I do every day is evaluate information. Never mind my personal life, and if I could get valuable information delivered to me in a consumable fashion that I could act on quickly, I mean, I'm happy to give away some of my information, and I think all of us would be. So it's a question of value, right?
Yeah.
Return on investment, if you like.
Absolutely. I think also on the data privacy side, we've seen Verizon, for instance, change some of their privacy policies over the last couple of years. They're launching precision marketing insights and going down that path. I think there are, others are going to start following, but it was a long road, I'm sure, for them to get there, right? To get to that privacy policy, both internally and externally, and probably, pave the way for some of the others. I think that privacy policy is really going to, dictate how big data evolves over the coming, even 18 months.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, interesting. Well, before we sign off here, I don't know if Roberta had any further questions, or if anybody else had any other topics they wanted to throw out there before we sign off today. I don't know, Roberta.
I think I would say just for ending, some recommendation from both of you regarding how carriers could start or could involve adopting analytics tools or some big data analytics.
Oh, sure. Shall I start?
Yeah, sure.
All right, sure. All right, so I think there are a number of things that they can do, and painting this with a broad brush, the first thing you need to do is focus on value, right? Because you've got to get a return on your investment here, and it's the only way that you're going to get top management support. The second thing I think you need to do is really educate your management on the value of this data and the importance of incorporating it into their decision making. The third thing I think you need to do is you need to manage data as a corporate asset, because that's what it is, and it's one of your most important corporate assets that you have at this point. I think we talked a little bit about getting a good head start and doing some small projects and managing things like a portfolio. I think that is important. It's important to start small, get some momentum, and have some continuous improvement, if you will. So this continuous improvement sort of strategy, I think, is important. And the final piece, and we talked about this, so I won't spend much time on it, is the human piece, the HR piece, right? Developing your people, developing your data scientists, or whatever you want to call them. So those would probably be the top 4 or 5 recommendations that I would give.
Interesting. And Chris, yeah, any insight?
Yeah, I would. I definitely agree on starting small and gaining some initial traction. I think one of the challenges and actually the opportunities really is in leveraging external resources in this realm. Internal resources generally aren't going to have the experience or expertise in big data and predictive analytics, and you need some outside of the box thinking. So I think getting that outside of the box thinking, again, asking the right questions is going to be absolutely key for operators to to really embrace big data analytics and really monetize it down the road.
I think that's absolutely right. And if I can cite something that came actually from some of our other research, not our analytics research per se, we just completed a managed services paper, all right, and actually I was the one who wrote it, and I think we went out and surveyed around 75 service providers one way or another, and one of the things that came back was we asked them what would be the most popular applications delivered through managed services over the next 3 years, and about a third of them chose analytics. Now, of course, CRM is huge there, billing is huge there. Those are traditional plays, and they were up in the 50% range. But just behind that, along with a couple